What's going on, football fans? Back once again with another rendition of the Pound for Pound. I'm J.R. Clark, and we're just going to jump right into it. We are dead in the middle of free agency. Today is the day that it officially kicked off. We've had the 3 days of tampering since Sunday. Since that time, they've gotten the CBA ratified, which is good. That means we don't have a work stoppage. They're not letting this the pandemic mess with free agency at this junction, which is really good. I'll speak on to that for just a second. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I'm sure y'all are getting hit over the head, but y'all be safe out there. Take the necessary precautions, and we can get through this thing hopefully pretty quickly, So let's just get into the distractions. Let's just get into the fun. Let's just get into something that get and keep our mind off all this craziness right now. We kicked off with a big deal, right? It got announced that Austin Hooper signed a deal with the Cleveland Browns, which, he was going to go get his money, and he is now the highest paid tight end in NFL history. I don't know if, obviously we weren't going to pay him that kind of money, And the more I look at it, and the more I think about it, I don't really feel like Austin Hooper was a Rob Gronkowski or a Travis Kelce or even George Kittle. These are guys that you built an offense around. And, we're going to see, obviously. In Cleveland, he should benefit from having talent. Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, Nick Chubb, David Njoku. He shouldn't have to be the man, but you're paying him to be the man. So in that aspect, I hope he lives up to the billing. But hey, good for him. I'll never get into anybody else's pocket. So awesome. Glad he got paid. Now, after that went down, very shortly thereafter, the news broke that we had traded a second round and a fifth round pick for 2018's first round pick, Hayden Hurst, and a fourth round pick. Now, that's interesting because Hayden Hurst and Austin Hooper, around the same age. Obviously, Hooper's been in the league longer than Hurst. Hurst has been in the league only 2 years. And his first year, he was kind of battling, he came in battling a little bit of injury and then got overshadowed by the Ravens' third round pick, Mark Andrews. So some people were holding that against them, but I see it as a plus for us because when given the opportunity, he performed well for Baltimore. And it's not like Baltimore was necessarily a pass-heavy offense, especially not last season with Lamar Jackson, and he still caught, I think, 4 or 5 touchdowns. I think it might be 3 touchdowns. It was over 500-something yards. But given his opportunity, he was able to produce, is what I'm saying. Yes, he couldn't beat out Mark Andrews, so to speak, but I think that had more to do with that him and Lamar Jackson had fell into a rhythm early, given Hayden Hurst's initial injury that he was dealing with, okay? So is he going to come in and be a perfect replacement for Austin Hooper? Only time will tell that. I think he's a more athletic version of Austin Hooper. And for an OC who likes to stretch the field, I think it's a better fit in a sense. Austin Hooper wasn't really going to burn anybody up the seam. He was going to find the soft spot in the zone, lay down, catch the ball. Didn't never really have a ton of yards after catch. He did like to try to hurdle people, but I think Hayden Hurst can give you some of the similar traits that an Austin Hooper gave you. So in that aspect, the tight end class in this draft wasn't really blowing anybody's skirt away, with Cole Kmet being out of Notre Dame being the best overall choice. So it really looked like the team didn't necessarily want to use a high round draft pick on a tight end of this class. So they decided to use the draft capital that we acquired from New England on the Mohamed Sanu trade. So if you want to look at it like we traded Mohamed Sanu for Hayden Hurst and then traded a 5th round for a 4th round, I don't think that's too bad, especially considering Hayden Hurst is still on his rookie deal with the 5th-year option. So you could potentially lock him up for 3 years for pretty cheap, okay? Now, I'm going to take a second here and kind of speak to all the two-faced Twitter GMs out there. I'm not going to call anybody out because that's not my style. But there's some folks out here that on the Twitterverse that have 2 separate accounts. You know who you are, and you're tweeting out of both sides of your mouth, okay? On your personal account, you're dogging the Falcons for everything they do, right? And then on your website account, you're posting up positive things about the Hayden Hurst thing, or positive things about what the Falcons do. Look now, you can't have your cake and eat it too, all right? If you're going to be a negative Nancy Falcon fan, just be a negative Nancy Falcon fan. There's plenty of those out there. You can jump right in with them. I've been reading them all day. I've been reading them for the past 3 days. So, you know, if you're going to be a negative Nancy, be a negative Nancy. I'm going to echo something my partner said during the bad off season, or during the bad season, and has echoed it more than once in the off season. I'm going to root for whoever's on this team. Period. Point blank. You see this right here? That's who I root for. Okay? Whether it's the coach, whether it's the GM, whether it's the quarterback, whoever. You know, this is the team I root for. I would have, you know, criticize them. That's fine. I'll criticize them. I criticize them over the season, you know. But at the end of the day, I'm going to root for my team. So that's all I'm going to say on that one. Now, let's fast forward a little bit to today. Well, okay. After all that, you got the announcement that you were releasing DevontaFreeman and you were releasing DesmondTrufant. Now, those became official today, right? And DesmondTrufant became a post-June 1 cut. Now, what that means, most of y'all already know. I'm assuming that if you're watching me, you know what a post-June 1 cut is, but I'm going to give a quick explanation, is that they take the dead money and spread it out over 2 years. So it's a better way of freeing up more space, right? So by making DesmondTrufant a post-June 1 cut, you're freeing up about $10 million in cap space, okay? Now, the downside of the post-June 1 cut, obviously June 1, you don't get it till then. But that money you know you have, and that's what you're going to sign your draft class with. So those were some of the moves they made today as far as regarding our own roster. Now, in the meantime, they've also re-signed Stephen Means. What they did see out of him before he tore his ACL, they liked, so they brought him back on a cheap 1-year deal. They've re-signed Ryan Allen, the punter. They've re-signed Young-Ho Koo. They've re-signed Keith Smith, the fullback. So they've made a handful of decent quality like signings, bringing some of our guys back. But the big news, and I'm 8 minutes in or whatever, and I'm like purposely trying to build the suspense, is today, right before the league year started, it got announced that we were signing Dante Fowler Jr. out of, most recently of LA. Now, some of y'all might remember Dante Fowler Jr. was in the same draft class as Vic Beasley, so he's only 25, 26 years old. He was the 3rd overall pick to Vic Beasley's 8th overall pick. And we signed him to a 3-year, $48 million deal. It's about $16 million a year. Now, that comes in far shy of what Yannick Ngakoue from Jacksonville wanted, and about $4 or $5 million shy from what Jadeveon Clowney was looking for, who still hasn't gotten. You know, those guys were looking north of $20 million a year. Now, Dante Fowler came out early in the offseason and saying that he wanted to play for Dan Quinn and that he wanted to play in Atlanta. So I think that had a lot to do with it, because the early reports are is that the Rams tried to re-sign him, but he ended up coming to Atlanta instead. Now, this is after reports came out that Atlanta was trying to get Robert Quinn, former of the LA Rams and the Dallas Cowboys, but he chose to go to Chicago instead. Now you're like, oh, well, why would he choose to go to Chicago? Hello, Khalil Mack. You know, Roquan Smith, pretty good defensive line up there. So I can't say that I necessarily blame him there. But we landed a guy who is fired up to be here, and that I like. That I'm really interested. The fact that he has publicly come out and said he wants to be here, has publicly come out and said that he wants to play for Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn recruited him in college, coached him for a little bit, but ultimately went back to the NFL. So it sounds like this is a guy that wants to get back under the tutelage of Dan Quinn. Now, one of the main problems that we have with Vic Beasley, and something I stated more times than not, this is the times where I say, I'll be critical when it needs to be critical. The tape on Beasley, not necessarily the tape, but the reports on him is that he didn't necessarily have the dog in him, right? He didn't necessarily have that fight, that want to, that will to be great. Okay? So maybe that lack of will, that lack of want to rubbed off on Tack. Maybe now getting somebody in here who is excited and who wants to play for Dan Quinn, that may fire Tack up, right? And Tack seems like he might be a guy who feeds off the people in his room. And if Beasley's sitting over there just ho-humming it, then, maybe that had an adverse effect to Tack. I'm not saying it does. I'm just spitballing here. But what I am excited about, like I said, is to have Dante Fowler in here. He's coming off the best year that he's ever had, 11.5 sacks. He got injured right out the gate in his rookie year, blew his ACL, or it may have been his ACL. Anyway, blew his knee, I think. And took him a little while to get going again. Then you had the fact that he was in Jacksonville, and they always have like coaching upheaval, regime changes, stuff like that. Just the instability, I guess you could say, of Jacksonville can sometimes affect a guy. Just like what happens when guys go to Cleveland sometimes. I'm not saying about Austin Hooper. I know it's just a coincidence, but Cleveland, can't change the culture, so to speak. Maybe they will this time. Anyway, but out there in LA, now granted, he was on the line with Aaron Donald, Michael Brookers, and Clay Matthews this past year. So it may have been easier for him to get 11.5 sacks. But that means the talent's there, and you hope that he's starting to put it together. He's got a ringing endorsement from everybody's favorite Chuck Smith on Twitter saying that he's a pass rusher on the rise, so maybe he can keep rising. So that's exciting nonetheless to have a solidified pass rushing help. Now, what I would very much like to see that the Falcons do before this free agency is completely over is I would like to see them bring in a veteran cornerback, because like I said, we did release DesmondTrufant. Now, there were some early reports that they may have been on not Xavier Rhodes. There was a cornerback out of the Vikings. I can't think of his name right now, but then the corner from LA, I am drawing a blank on it. Roby was his last name. Yeah. That they were kind of high on him. Now, he hasn't been signed. Roby hasn't been signed yet. So that's still a possibility that they could bring him in as a slot corner or whatever. But I would like some veteran presence. Even bringing back Bleedy Ray Wilson would be a nice supplemental way. He played well for us in the absence of DesmondTrufant. So I definitely would not mind at all seeing them re-sign him. Along the lines, you still have out there, Marcus Golden, who I'm not exactly sure what he's commanding. We're probably out of the market for him right now with bringing Dante Fowler in there. If we get another edge rusher, it will probably be from the draft, and I'll get to the draft here in just a second. But I wouldn't mind seeing, a cornerback and possibly even a offensive guard would be nice. But it does sound like that they're going to give James Carpenter and Jamon Brown another chance at filling in for that left guard spot. So that'll be interesting to see if they can bounce back from the putrid season that they had. Sometimes players just need a year to adjust. Who knows? Hopefully that won't be the case for Dante Fowler, right? Hopefully he can just hit the ground running. But now let's talk about the draft for just a second. I'm not going to keep y'all long about this, but doing this now like influences the draft. Obviously, free agency always influences the draft. That's why the last time we did a CBA, they fought to move the draft or move free agency in front of the draft, right? Because to give these veterans more of a chance before you did the draft. Because used to the draft affected free agency. Well, now free agency affects the draft. So with that being said, going into the draft now, it's not 100% guaranteed that they're going to go after a pass rusher. So those K'Lavon Chaisson folks, that might be somebody that you look at, but now, somebody put it out on Twitter, and I think it might have been a real Pat Man, but I was thinking along the same lines. But I'll give him credit so that nobody, jumps down my throat on that. But the tape that I watched of K'Lavon Chaisson, he seemed more like a rush linebacker, meaning more of a linebacker than an edge rusher, in my opinion. I saw him drop into coverage quite a bit. So, if you don't feel like you can re-sign Devondre Campbell, maybe, just maybe, you go ahead and draft K'Lavon Chaisson, right? Let him rush the passer. Let him drop back into coverage and do some of the things that Devondre Campbell did for you. You may have a more athletic version of a Devondre Campbell. Same thing if he's gone that you might try to do with somebody like a Zach Bond. Or say you go cornerback in the first round. Now that seems like that could be a possibility. Somebody like Fulton from LSU, or even AJ Terrell, but I think he's more of a second round guy from everything I've seen, but who knows. With that being said, yeah, like if you were to pick up somebody like Josh Uche out of Michigan, let him do some of the things that Devondre Campbell did for you. But I definitely think that somebody like a Zach Bond or a Josh Uche would be a great replacement if you can't re-sign Devondre Campbell. Now, ultimately, I would love to re-sign Devondre Campbell because he already knows the scheme, he knows the coaches, and as from what I've seen, his name is not being mentioned anywhere. So it'll be interesting to see what his market is. Maybe it's not as hot as he thought. Maybe he'll come back for a decent price. So that's all I got right now. We're going to have a live stream on Tuesday, so y'all keep an eye on that. And I'm sure, we'll have a lot to talk about then. You can hit us up on Twitter. My handle is Grim1128. That's GRIMM1128. And Toby D is TobyD1991. We love interacting with y'all, answering questions, doing whatever. And also, like a little side note, if I'm all over Atlanta all the time for my job and everything, if you happen to see me, say hello. I ran into a guy over the week down at one of our vendors in Atlanta for the company I work for, and it was really nice just to say hello and shake his hand and tell him thank you. So if you see me out there, man, just, wave at me, throw something at me, say what's up, because I would, pretty much, very much appreciate to fist bump you or elbow bump you right now. But, and as far as that goes, again, man, y'all stay safe out there. Just take the precautions, do that whole 6 feet social distancing, try not to get up in everybody's space. But I think should be able to pull through this just fine, God willing. So, anywho, that's all I got for y'all. And as always, Falcons fans, rise up.